my first question is: there's a lot of talented artists out there, and they're trying to make a living, doing what they love, making a living off their art or their film or their music or whatever they're doing, and they can't really seem to separate themselves from the pack. They can't get the attention of, a lot of executives like you have that have green-lighted your projects. And could you share with us, your story, how you went from being a kid with some, pretty wild ideas and passion for adventure to actually getting your own cartoon on the Cartoon Network and working on these feature films?
Yeah. And you also asked me before this to come up with like kind of a bio of where I've been, and I think those all kind of are tied together.
Yeah.
So I guess I always wanted to do children's books because I love to draw and I love to paint and I love to tell stories. So I mean, I grew up being told that you couldn't really have a job as an artist. Like, you do that as a hobby, and being an artist is like something you do in your own time on the side. And I never wanted that to be true. And my parents really pushed it on me. They weren't going to help pay for art school. Like, I was going to be a businessman. And so I guess I didn't really know the route to take. And maybe that was good. Maybe that was bad. But I ended up just like struggling to write these books, and it was just stabs in the dark. I didn't know like story structure, and I read some books, but there's so many bad books of people who don't know how to really do it, that I was just kind of lost for a while, and I ended up just being a bum and hopping trains and working on fishing boats and stuff. And I thought, well, I'm going to make stories about all this stuff eventually. And then my friend Nate Cash got a job at a video game company. And I was like slowly finding whatever art jobs there were around Salt Lake City. And that was like, oh, wow, yeah, I want to do that. So, so even though I wasn't really into video games or anything, it was cool because an artist.
Yeah.
And so, as soon as I started there, I just totally fell in love with animation, and I realized, like, even more than children's books, this is everything that I want to do. You can tell a story, especially the way video games were going with like storylines and stuff. And you could do the art, and you could do animation, and you could do voices and songs and stuff. And it was like, this is what I want to do. And so I guess kind of through that community and asking like, well, how do people get like the cool jobs?
Yeah.
And everyone kind of pointed towards CalArts, which was founded by Walt Disney. And I was kind of turned off to it because of that, because I'd kind of become jaded about Disney movies. But I went on a tour of all the art schools, and I was like 25 by this point or something like that. And I went on a tour of all the art schools on the West Coast. Not really that interested in CalArts, but just seeing like the difference and at that time what people were doing was like enormous. And I realized that's exactly what I want to do, CalArts. So it took me a couple years to get in. They were very, and it was weird going from like, I mean, most artists do art because they don't want to listen in school, or they don't want to do what someone else tells them to.
Right.
So it was a weird transition going from like, I want to have my own style. I don't want to copy anyone's stuff. And I don't really want to learn from anyone else. I just want to do it to like becoming a student. And I think it took me those 25 years to kind of get to that point where I was focused enough, and I maybe matured enough to I guess learn from someone else. So once I started at CalArts and I realized like story is where it's at, you got to have a good story. I think that was the biggest thing for me. Like, even for writing children's books, I think people in the Hollywood end really know story because you have to tell so many stories every day so fast, and you do it wrong so many times. Eventually, you learn how to do it. So I get really into the story, and I was already married when I went to CalArts, and I didn't have a lot of money, and I was taking out loans. So I was like, okay, I've got a couple years, and I'm going back to being a bum if I don't make something happen. So I was really, really focused to make Flapjack while I was at CalArts. I think my second year of film was like a Flapjack pilot, and I started pitching that around. And you have, I'm just going to the right school. You have a lot more connections than you would anywhere else, because both the people you're going to school with and people in the industry, your teachers are in the industry, and people just watch you if you're in one of the better schools. So I was able to get in and pitch around, but nobody took me serious. The first time I pitched, the lady was like looking out the window when I was pitching and like saying hi to people. Oh, hey, Jerry! Like nothing to say, just like so bored that this stupid kid was in there pitching, and just didn't take me serious at all. Like even before I'd started, just like, you're a kid. What are you gonna have? And so I realized I gotta work my way up first and then pitch. So it was another few years before I was able to get in and pitch again. And in the meantime, I was still just trying to get a job anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taking tests and stuff, but I didn't know. I mean, it's one of those catch-22s. Like, no one wants to hire you without experience, but you can't get experience
Right.
without doing it. And so I think it was one of the lecturers we had at CalArts. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Craig Kelman. Said, find someone who's doing exactly what you want to do, or like the closest thing that you want to do, and work for him for free, like through an internship or whatever. And I was like, oh, cool, like an apprentice. And so I worked at Cartoon Network was where I wanted to be, and that's where all my heroes were at that time. And so I worked. They didn't have an internship program, so I called or emailed the president, Brian Miller, and every day was like, "Hey, how about an internship program?" And then I realized, whoa, every day is probably going to piss him off. So I started doing it once a week. And finally they did it, and I started my internship program. And after like 2 years a year and a half of trying to get a job, like I think in my memory, it's like that day I went to a story meeting. It was probably like a few days later, but I went to a story meeting on Powerpuff Girls, and Craig McCracken was like, "We're all out of ideas. We've already done every episode." And I was like, "Oh, no, this is my chance." And